do it. But I understand.
Well, thank you guys for coming tonight. There's a program guide on the chairs that are available. It has a who's who in this Mock J.C. It has some information about the J.C. and how it operates, our law book, and how that is integral to our school. On the next page, there's also a glossary of terms that may sound unfamiliar or you may not know quite how they're used, so that's available for you guys as well. And then on the back page is the case, the write-up form for the case that we'll be hearing tonight. And also, we have a little bit of shift from the email that was sent out and the roles that were being played. Originally, Kenzie was going to get written up with Jaden, and Jaden wasn't able to come, and Kenzie's going to be now serving as our middle member. And instead, Xander and Katie are the people who got written up and will be playing that. Yeah, they did some bad things.
More realistic.
Terrible thing. So tonight, one thing when we're up here presenting, and also when we get into the Q&A session, what I would like to ask everybody to do is not bring up specific cases from the school day, from this year or years past, and just talk about it in generality of, if this were to happen, or what would happen if this, that kind of stuff, just so that we're not talking about the school meeting members and stuff that is happening during the school day to respect their privacy, their time here. Without further ado, then, I would like to start our Mock J.C.
Alright, my call is J.C. to order. This case, Christy wrote up Katie and Xander near the South Brookwell for B1.7 and C3-3.1. Brief description reads, Katie and Xander used the tree and the pergola by the grill to climb onto the roof. Witnesses are counted. Any discussion on hearing this case? All those in favor, raise your hands. All opposed, motion carries 4-0. Christy. This is the case where you wrote up Katie and Xander?
Yeah. I was outside walking around and I saw them climbing the tree and watched Katie get up on the roof.
Do you happen to know why they were on the roof?
No, I don't know. I didn't see them.
Okay. Anything else about the case?
How'd they get from the tree to the roof?
They used the pergola to climb onto the roof, what I saw. Katie did at least.
Alright, should we get Kelton?
I think we can let Kristen go.
Yeah, you can go. Kelton. Alright. This is the case where Christy wrote up Katie and Xander for using a tree to climb onto the roof. What did you see?
I was in the sandbox. I saw them playing with the frisbee. Katie accidentally threw it onto the roof, and Katie and Xander started climbing the tree. Katie got onto the pergola, and Xander said, "I don't think that's a good idea." And Katie said, "I still want to get the frisbee in." He got down.
Okay. More questions for Kelton?
I think so.
Alright, you can go.
Katie, Xander.
Right. This is the case where you were written up for using the tree to get onto the roof. Xander?
I did not go on the roof. I climbed up the tree after Katie, and once I was up there, it was a bad idea to keep trying to go up on the roof. She said she was still going to get the frisbee, so I climbed down.
Katie?
I went on the roof. He's a pergola.
Just to make sure, you did not have the building maintenance clerk's permission?
No.
And this was an attempt to get your frisbee?
Yes.
Right.
Do you have a summary?
Yeah. Katie and Xander accidentally threw a frisbee on the roof. Katie climbed the tree and crossed the pergola to get onto the roof to retrieve the frisbee without the building maintenance clerk's permission. Xander climbed onto the tree but did not go on the roof.
Move to adopt that summary. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hands. All opposed, motion carries 4-0.
Do you guys want to know what the rules read?
Yes.
So B 1.7 is it's prohibited to climb on either of the pergolas. And C 3-3.1 is under building maintenance clerk. And it says the following areas may only be entered with the building maintenance clerk's permission, and it includes the roof.
Should we charge Katie with both?
I move to charge Katie with B 1.7E and C3-3.1.
Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hands. All opposed, motion carries 4-0. Katie, you've been charged with B 1.7E and C 3-3.1. Have you plead to both?
Yes. What do you guys think?
It seemed like a definite safety hazard to me.
Yeah. And that's why it's under, you know, the building maintenance restricted areas. Do you think since it's under a building maintenance clerk, they should talk to she should talk to the building maintenance clerk about why it's not okay to go up on the roof?
It seems appropriate. What do you guys think? Someone want to make a motion?
Well, I think there should be something else. This talk is a little, because it was pretty dangerous. Jesse, you have any ideas?
So have Katie assist building maintenance clerk with his duties.
Yeah.
Sound good? We probably also set a time limit on it,
Yeah, what do you think?
About,
20 minutes.
yeah. Just one day?
I think it should be more than one.
Maybe like today and the next few days for attendance?
Sounds good to me.
So we're gonna make that a motion?
I move the following be Katie's summary. Katie must assist the building maintenance clerk with his duties for up to for up to 20 minutes for today and the next day of her attendance. Must spend up to 5 minutes talking to the building maintenance clerk about why Rule B 1.7E and C3-1.1, C3-3.1 exist.
Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hands. All opposed, motion carries 4-0. Katie, do you understand the sentence?
Yes.
All right. Sounds good. I think you two can go. J.C. adjourned.
All right. Thank you, everyone who participated in this Mock J.C. and for demonstrating what happens on a day-to-day basis with our law book and with NJC. And now let's open up for any questions. And you can ask any of the people that were up here, and I invite Katie and Xander and Christy as well to come up here. I know it's a little bright, but just to be available for questions or anything about what role they served or why they did things the way that they did. And yeah, Right.
I have lots of questions. Does staff usually do most of the talking and guiding of the JC?
Not necessarily. I mean, it kind of just depends on what's happening with the case. I don't know if you guys want to.
And did you say staff?
Staff.
Yeah. But staff generally seems to be fairly involved, except more often than not, they are the secretary. Not many students like to do that.
Understandable. And then, how often do you have conflicting testimony between what somebody says and the witnesses?
Yeah, that does sometimes happen. But then we can try to get more testimony from other witnesses, try to balance it out, see what seems more legitimate. Further investigations.
Of course, the reasonable doubt clause still comes in if we can't figure anything out. We're still unsure.
Can you explain the reasonable doubt clause as it applies to this?
Actually, Yeah, to properly charge someone, it has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that they are actually guilty. If there are any other possibilities that actually seem somewhat plausible, then it advises JC not to charge them.
Another way to think about that is, if the JC charges someone and they plead not guilty, it's up to the JC to have a prosecutor, and if no one's willing to prosecute it, then you shouldn't really make the charge.
Sure.
In this particular example, since they were both charged initially, and then basically it sounded like Xander really had no part in the trouble that was being charged. Does it have to be divided, or is there anything official as far as dropping him off of that form, or does it just become part of the case? There's just a line in there, something about Xander had nothing to be bothered with it, or whatever.
He gets mentioned in the summary, but if he didn't do anything wrong, he didn't break any rules, just don't charge him.
We were both alleged violators, but that doesn't mean we're charged with anything.
Oh, I got you.
After the summary has been written, then charges can happen, and they tend to be based on the summary.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not.
How many people are in the Judicial Committee?
It is the younger member, the middle member, the older member, the staff member, and the chair. Sometimes there's an extra voting member.
So typically 5.
Typically 5. Okay, so that'll break the tie if a tie occurs.
Yeah, generally the chair doesn't vote in motions, but if there is a tie, the chair can break the vote.
Okay.
Either way.
Or let it fail.
Yeah, Jess.
What if the issue actually involves something that's illegal and not just, like in this case, unsafe?
We have rules that talk about specific illegal activities.
I mean something else, if there's anything outside the Judicial Committee that handles that?
Right, like if it's something that's a bigger issue than, I'm trying to make something out here, but,
They're being drugged on the campus.
yeah, bring drugs onto campus. Like at that point, are outside authorities also brought in? Like what happens?
In that case, like, suspension can be considered.
Okay.
Sentencing and charging for that will most likely be discussed in school meeting, because it's a much bigger issue.
So school meeting is similar, but with the full.
School meeting pretty much runs everything that goes on in school meeting. Like, everything goes through school
And
meeting.
if I sound like nothing, it's because I'm distanced enough from this that I actually don't know how a lot of these things work.
Yeah,
That's perfectly fine.
I think the example you gave,
So, for instance, when you have a bigger case or a bigger issue that, such as a suspension or as something where the sentence goes on for a long time, or it's a really difficult case to work with, the JC can vote to do a variety of things. They can vote to recommend sentencing to school meeting, so that at the next school meeting, whoever is present for that portion of the meeting can talk about what are some ideas, how do we want to do this, and is this appropriate? And it doesn't mean, so for instance, and the JC will send a recommended sentence. Let's say somebody is getting recommended to be suspended. It doesn't mean that they are. At school meeting level, then, discussion occurs. Well, does this warrant a suspension? Yes, no, and then discussion, and then a vote happens there. And that can happen for a variety of different issues. There's a contempt charge that goes to school meeting, where if you're being disruptive, or if you ditch JC if you need it and not on campus, didn't get a clerk's permission, there's a whole bunch of things that can be sent to school meeting for that.
But it would start at JC and then
Yes.
and they would decide to move it up.
Absolutely. Yeah, Aaron.
I noticed that you brought in each of the witnesses individually and then dismissed them and then brought in the alleged violators. Is that common practice? Do you not have the opportunity to face your accuser, or is this non-typical and generally the witnesses are still there?
Generally they leave, but sometimes they stay there to suggest ideas to sentence people.
They're allowed to stay. Oftentimes they won't for a minor case like this would be. Sometimes they're a more serious case, or if it was more of a personal violation against them, then they might stay, but it's still, I think it's good practice for the chair to allow them to leave once they're no longer actually needed for the case.
And in terms of order, that really depends on the case, which we can get from the brief description. But it's general procedure to call in the complainant first, and then the alleged violators, and then if there's some controversy in testimony, then we can call in other witnesses. But really, it all depends on the case.
Yeah, Mark.
So for the person who's being accused, can they call their own witness and talk to or ask that witness? Or is that done by the committee?
Well, in a case like that, I guess the alleged violator can say, well, it doesn't say so on the form, but so-and-so is there. Maybe they can say something to clear things up.
But if that person who's being accused doesn't feel like the right questions are being asked, or the deeper truth, if one lies hidden, is not being revealed, can they then themselves pose questions to that witness, or do they have to remain silent and you guys do your will?
They generally address the chair and ask if they want to, they can ask the chair if they can ask that person a question. But you
Okay.
would ask the J.C. clerk first.
All right, so just formal protocol, but the answer is yes, they can.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
if they felt that a charge was unfair, then go to a trial, which has a much different set of procedures. They are able to call all their own witnesses, everything like this. Yeah, they're able to question their witnesses. It's handled much more like a formal trial.
Gotcha, okay.
And also, if a person has any sort of problem with something going on in JC, like the JC advisor, they're not being fair, that can also be brought up in school meeting. You can pretty much bring anything up in school meeting, because school meeting is like the ultimate decision.
Mhm.
Yeah, Angela.
So, real quick, can you run us through what would have happened had Katie pled not guilty to the charges? If we had done this whole procedure and she had said, no, I didn't do that, tell us what the next steps would be after that.
So Carlos is the chair, would have filled out a trial form. This would consist of like who the defendant is, who is on JC, any witnesses that they know of, prosecution, things like that. He would hand it to me as the school meeting chair. I would schedule the trial, and yeah, just post it up somewhere. People could see it. And then and at the time and place it was scheduled, the trial would be heard. Does that answer your question?
And a trial.
Is it automatic trial if somebody pleads not guilty?
Yes.
And a trial is generally run like an actual courtroom would be, with a judge, a jury, a prosecution and defense, opening, closing statements, questions, witnesses, time to make each argument, so that way we can get the full story and get 4 other opinions, the jury, that weren't involved in the case at all.
Who makes those people, the judge and the jury, like prosecution and defense, I assume are assigned, kind of, or chosen or volunteered for, but what about judge and jury?
The judge is the school meeting chairman, and he decides, he goes around and finds people that have no idea what case it is, knows nothing about it, so that they don't know anything.
And just like the JC, the jury is split into a staff member, an older member, a middle member, and a younger member. If that isn't possible, then sometimes there are 2 of one group, but usually there are 4 people who don't know what's going on.
And all of this is available in the law. All the procedures for both JC and trials are in section E, I believe. And that's on the website, or you can come in and ask us for a copy of the law. We'll be happy to print out one. But
Are you suggesting that I read?
well, I'm just saying we want to go further into it. And a reading would be similar. But that is available for you, and if you want to see more of the procedures, especially in a trial, it outlines step by step what the process is. Lorraine, did you have a question?
Yeah, is there, I mean, this is sort of, is there animosity when people write people up?
There can be. There is on the complaint form, there is a box
An animosity box.
that you can check if you don't want to be called into JC.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
There's a box that you can check if you don't want to be called into JC. If you just really don't want to deal with it. You really don't want to be known.
So is that an anonymity?
Well, I mean, the JC kind of has to know who writes things up.
Right, does the rest of the school then, or say the accused, would the accused know who filed the complaint?
Not.
It always says
Yeah.
who wrote them.
I guess there is an animal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Video.
I feel,
There you go,
That's the
different
way,
question.
yes.
I feel
There
I don't think Carlos knows what animosity is.
That's okay.
while
Do people
they're,
get pissed off that they get
Yeah.
signed up, that they get written up by their friends? How does that feel when one of your friends writes you up?
I think it's more from students who are new to the school. Like they've been here for a year or so, they might take it a bit more personally until after they've been here for a while and they start to understand the judicial process and its importance.
Yeah, as you get used to the system, when you get written up by a friend, you can be mad at them in JC, but after that, it tends to just not matter.
After a while, it's not really your friend wrote you up, it's you broke a rule, so someone wrote you up.
There's no lasting
There's no-
animosity.
Yeah.
Now, I feel a little bit of hurt feelings right in the moment, but it doesn't last and it doesn't cause any damage.
and just decide what I passed out, is a sample of what Isaac, as the secretary, is typing. This is on a JC report. It has who was on the JC, who wrote who up, the summary of events, which is what the JC uses to charge or not charge. They make decisions off of that. It has what rule they charge them with, the person who got charged, the plea, and then the sentence. And it'll have other information if there's other things, like if it needs to be postponed or if, for whatever reason. And so that's all there, and that's available that's available for every school meeting member to look at the end of every JC to see. So there is really no anonymity for the case. So they would, if it's not stated, which I've never been in a case where it hasn't been stated that you were written up by so-and-so or whatnot, but if it's not, there is another way to find out. But as they're saying, it really is just part of their culture and part of the culture of the school, and if you break a rule, it's okay. Yeah, John?
So what happens if it is determined that if someone made a charge of someone and it turns out that there was no basis? Let's say that they didn't go anywhere near the roof, and it was clearly determined beyond reasonable doubt that that absolutely didn't happen, but the charge had been brought. So what happens then?
We can move to drop for whatever reason, for lack of wrongdoing or lack of confessing.
Yeah, sometimes it will be like a mess case. Like someone left out a soda can out on the main room table. And it's an unknown case. Like sometimes when people make a complaint form, they write up unknown, because they don't know who did it.
So there's been some cases like that where JC simply isn't able to find anyone who broke.
Well, my question's a little different.
Yeah.
Maybe the word frivolous comes in here. It's like, what if someone's
False
making
accusation.
frivolous or
So,
false
I think
accusation?
they're getting hung up on the word charge, because when we say that you're charged, it means that through all the testimony that people heard, and then they create a summary, it is determined you did break a law. If it's, the jargon that is used here is if you get written up, or if you're accused of breaking a rule here, or a law here. Is that what you're asking, if you're accused?
Yes.
It's asking like, what do you do with somebody who makes false accusations or frivolous accusations?
If someone submits a frivolous complaint, it might just be dropped, it might not be heard. Like at the beginning of each case, they vote whether or not to hear the case at all. But if it's clearly malicious and they're just trying to blame someone for something they didn't do, the JC could charge the person who wrote up the frivolous case with contempt. And then they have the reason for, when it's presented at the school meeting, they presented a clearly malicious case. And that's unacceptable. So then the school meeting would sentence them accordingly.
It seems so incredibly cut and dry for you folks, again, because you know each other as a community. There doesn't seem to be a lot of chatter around, most of the issues. You seem to know each other so well and know what happened that you really cut to the chase. It doesn't seem like you spend a lot of time running in circles. Is that the way it is with most of the cases that are presented, that people are so comfortable in the community and so feel safe with the fairness of it?
I think some of it is they want it over.
Yeah. So safe with the fairness of it, that people don't push against if they really get, they got caught doing something they knew was against the rules. Is there a lot of pushback, or for the most part, does it go pretty smoothly?
For the most part, it goes pretty smoothly. Sometimes you will think that you didn't leave something out, that you most definitely threw away, but you aren't completely sure, and so it just kind of goes around and around of who left the soda can out and didn't throw it away.
But the major things, like if someone had done something on the level of, okay, I got caught climbing the pergola and onto the roof. For most things, people seem to be okay once they hit JC with ownership. It feels that way in the group.
Basically,
That no one's going to
There are a
spend
few-
a lot of time trying to, lie, steal, and barter to make someone believe that something happened that didn't.
there are a few exceptions, but
Mhm.
basically always. that's
I feel
way
the
it is.
ease of
Things
the
go
process,
smoothly.
and
But
the
then-
fact that it's very unpersonal, and it's personal, but it's not, nobody's taking it personally.
But that doesn't mean there hasn't been controversy. There has definitely been controversy.
And I think this is a case where it's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
Because, like, if they were on the roof, sometimes there's a question of, should they be charged with this rule? Is what they did really against the law, or is it just?
Or how you interpret the rule.
Yeah.
Yeah, the big problem is if we had the controversial case here, we still won't have gotten to the questions and answers.
So what are your more controversial cases? Is there sort of a parentheses you put around a specific type of case that always tends to be, or often tends to be controversial?
It really depends, and that's a hard question to answer without going into specifics.
Sure.
But you'll see a lot of times where groups of people have done something and there's questions of ownership, or there's people don't remember what has happened because it happened a couple days ago, or it seemed so trivial at the time. All sorts of things can happen, and also even within laws, as they said, debating, did this actually break a law? Did this warrant a charge? And so that can take time.
Is it worth your time to get it?
Well,
Really?
it's worth the time, but it's did they do something that is warranted in getting a sentence, being charged?
Mhm.
And then sentencing a lot of time takes a lot of time.
Okay.
Well.
So that
things
portion would
and
take more than
sentencing,
any-
what really fits with it, and sentencing isn't supposed to be a punishment, it's supposed to be a reminder, so you don't do it again. So there's a line of debating that, and, is this too harsh, is it too easy, priors, there's a whole process in there.
And even for this case, we've practiced 2 separate times, and the first time, what you have is everything typed up, but I just was letting it run, see where they took it. And when we got to the sentencing part, even though it wasn't a real case, it was still, well, I don't think, this doesn't fit. Well, what if they can't go outside? Well, what if they just can't be near trees, or, and that's real discussion that happens around every case. Does this actually make sense? Is this too much? Is this too little?
And whoever feels that the sentence is unreasonable, they are also allowed to appeal, at which point that also goes before school meeting.
Very good.
Aaron?
If the law that's cited in the write-up form isn't accurate, what if it's something that doesn't apply to what the charge is?
We can look through the law book, and if we think that the rule that it was written up for, so when it's written up, it's just what they think is the rule they want to charge for, or they want to write it up for, and the JC just looks at that and they can decide whether that's the rule they want to charge for, or whether that doesn't quite fit, and so they choose a different rule. But it's kind of just a suggestion of what rule it should be written.
It's like if someone takes my computer and hides it in another part of the building, and I want to write that up. I could write that up. I could put on the complaint form, I think this is harassment and it should fall under the harassment rule. But in JC, there's discussion, and they decide, no, this fits more with the personal property rule.
It's similar to if someone's name is on the form, they don't have to get charged. It's the same sort of thing. If the rule is written down on the form, the JC doesn't have to use that rule. They can, it's up to them, it's up to their judgment. And the form's basically a suggestion and a starting point.
Mark, did you have a question?
I did. It may have been answered, perhaps not. If an accuser or an accusee was accused of something, and then really isn't a rule that was written up specific to that, is it then simply dismissed, or do you guys sit around saying, well, let's charge them with this?
Well, if we absolutely can't decide on a rule from our book and binder of really specific rules, which rarely happens, but sometimes it does happen, generally that would just get charged with A 1.1, which is the general rule, be cool.
And that's on, that's in your guide.
You're paraphrasing.
That's in your guide, to be cool. Do you have it? Do you have it?
Yeah. Do you want me to read it? Or-
Yeah.
Okay. All school committee members are responsible for the general welfare of the school through actions that contribute to preserving the atmosphere of freedom, respect, fairness, trust, and order that is the essence of the school's existence. Be cool.
Be cool. Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, now on another note, if the letter of the rule was written in such a way that it may be vague, has the committee moved to rewrite a rule or further define or clarify a rule?
That goes to school meeting if you actually want to rewrite it.
Yeah, if there is a specific instance in JC that you hear about where the wording of the rule didn't really fit the situation, but the situation definitely should have been charged with that rule, rewording of the rule can be discussed and moved in school meeting.
So you can't do anything just then. You have to go with what's in the rule book.
So at that point, is that person then dismissed, sorry we dragged you in here? Or are they dragged right back into committee once the rule has been rewritten?
So,
You have
JC,
to finish the case, so you would finish the case that's in front of you. The JC would probably charge them with the rule, even if the wording wasn't quite right. They might plead guilty or not guilty.
Bring it all the way down to the be cool rule?
I mean, you could do that, but it could just be, does the wording in the rule really apply to this? Well, it could be interpreted that way, but it'd be nice to clarify. The JC will usually charge them with that specific rule, and then it may or may not go to trial, and then you deal with that. But if someone thinks that the rule should change, then they bring that to school meeting, which is a whole other process. And then if it gets changed at school meeting, once that change has been voted on, then it'll go into the law book, and future cases can be tried on it. But we won't postpone someone's case, 2 or more weeks until the other rule has been changed.
All right.
John, did you have a question?
Yeah, you mentioned before, or you talked a little bit about sentencing. Now, I'm not very well informed, but I think out there in the other world, there are guidelines for sentencing depending on what you're convicted of. Are there sentencing guidelines that APS uses?
There isn't anything written. Sometimes there are just some cultural norms as to, for this law, this sentence seems to fit, but there's not actually anything written as to for this law you have to apply the sentence.
Generally, a sentence given has to do with what went on in that specific case, how that person broke the rule, and how they can work to curb that.
And if someone thinks it didn't fit, they can always get that.
Bruce?
Well, there's a specific procedure that calls you to take into account what we call member records, which is to say, has this person broken this rule 10, 20, 30 times? Have they never broken it before? And then the cultural norm of, well, let's give them a warning because it's their first time. Or they've broken it X number of times. We better send it to school meeting because this part of the process doesn't seem to be working in this instance with this person.
John? Well, I raised your hand.
Oh, no.
No, go ahead.
So I'm wondering, I'm just curious how the way JC process is done here in Colorado differs from how it's done in Massachusetts, if at all, how it's evolved over the years.
Larry?
Well, I can answer that, because I've been to Sudbury Valley a number of times. I've been to Fairhaven School a number of times, and I've been to Sacramento Valley. So I've been to at least 3 Sudbury schools around the country, and it's virtually identical. Sudbury Valley is a little different because they're not high-tech like us. They write things down on like a pen and paper, which is it's weird. That's what I said when I go. It's like, why do you do this? So we're very high-tech. We have a computer, but it's really it's rule of law. It's due process. The other elements of this. In a trial, the accused does not have to testify against himself. The Fifth Amendment applies. And most of the time, it was mentioned earlier, most of the time people plead guilty because they did it. And oftentimes, not guilty pleas happen, John, because there's an interpretation of the law difference, right? They'll say, and this happened a lot when I had the young son here. I'm sorry, we're not supposed to say that. I'm sorry. But he's gone now, so it doesn't matter. So, but he would be, or sorry, somebody would be written up for one law, right? But it could be, look, I did this action, but I didn't break this law. I broke this law, but J.C. has it in their head that they want to charge me with this law, right? It's a pretty sophisticated reasoning and very interesting reasoning because school meeting members take this stuff seriously. Don't charge me with a law that I didn't break. Charge me with the law I did break. Not with the law I didn't break. I think one of the great features of this, and that I like so much about this model, is it's very real to us. This isn't just playtime. It's real. These are our lives. This is our freedom. When we get called into JC, and staff do too. Staff get written up. Certain staff get written up, and it's intense because you know what? I screwed up. I broke the rules, and I am getting charged, and my liberty is at stake to some probably small degree, but it's very real to me, and it's very real to all school meeting members. So anyway, it's kind of interesting. So yeah, it's very much the same in the other schools I've been to.
And when I volunteered at Plowgrass Library School in Chicago, they had very similar systems as well. And I don't know, Bruce saw the same thing.
Yeah, well, I served on J.C.'s at Clearview last year, and I also visited Fairhaven, and it's like going from the U.S. into Canada. Everything's a little bit different, but you can kind of follow along without that much trouble. You may have to do some conversion. Okay, there's this many voting members instead of this many, or you call it a consequence instead of a sentence.
Probably more polite there.
It's just possibly a lot of A 1.1.
Right.
No, but it's so easy to slip into the different ones because it's substantively very similar.
You had a question?
And I guess this is more curiosity. Outside of staff and students, has anyone else ever been brought in?
I believe since they're not school meeting members, they
Subject.
don't fall under our system.
All right, so and this is hypothetical now, this is the what if scenario. Here I am as a parent of a student, and going on, I think, 3 years now. If I was habitually doing something that bothered or violated some rule, what would be the school's course of action to address me?
We would complain at Larry.
If I can answer my dad's question.
You can.
Okay.
You have my permission.
And this has happened in the past. You can ask Larry. I think I would be written up.
Not necessarily.
I mean, it doesn't have to happen, but it has happened in the past. Like, I remember Larry telling me multiple times about how when Ellie was just too young to go to school, she would leave out a mess and Larry would be written up for it.
Yeah, that's a very different situation. Staff are allowed to have their non-school age children at school, but they are responsible for their behavior. So that is true. When I had a child who was younger than school age, and she got written up, yes, I did get charged. But I'm over that now.
To answer your question, though, there is a very recent discussion going on at the school meeting, and with the attendance clerks on how do we address that issue of what are the boundaries that we're setting? And it's one instance of how fluid our systems are, is that there can be changes that happen all the time, and certifications and procedures and all these different things can change when the governing bodies decide to do so, and when they see it fit. And so right now, the attendance clerks are looking at how do we allow students to bring in parents so that they can go see artwork or a game or something without disrupting the whole system. And so the attendance clerks are working at implementing a certification process, signing in the visitor, and then having them, being with them as they go throughout the building. And then in the main room, it's more of an informal system. They're signing. We set up a waiting area for parents and other visitors to sit, and if they're waiting for their kids, and if they're invited or engage in a conversation with somebody, obviously you can step out of that place and engage in conversation with them. But we have to be respectful of the students and staff that are working or doing other things. But the certification is a way of saying that person, whoever's signing them in as a visitor, is taking responsibility for it.
I think it's also important to point out that while we do operate under rule of law, we do have structures and procedures, that doesn't preclude actually talking to people as well. And so if someone, well, it's okay, but if someone were doing something repeatedly or that just needed to be addressed, it could just be addressed. And as a school meeting, part of the procedures is that we have officials called registrars who their responsibility is to be the liaison between school meeting and the rest of the community. So that would probably be where we would start, which may be what Katie was saying originally by saying, well, we just complain to Larry.
Angela?
Shift subjects, shift gears a little bit. Can you explain to us how the clerk is chosen and how that position works and all that stuff?
The JC clerks?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey.
I'm sorry, we're all making funny hand motions and it's just funny.
I'm sorry, I don't read sign language.
Yes, we just have elections every, I think it's 6 weeks?
It's supposed to be 6 weeks.
Specific things.
I'm not either, I'm just looking at Xander.
Is your bulletin broken here?
Yeah, our last elections came just slightly over about 4 weeks.
It used to be nice.
Which works out well enough because the same JC clerk got re-elected for a 2-week term. And JC clerk, usually people run in teams of 2 or more, so that way you can rotate days being chair, and so there's less of a workload or more people to consult. As it is now, there are 4 JC clerks, and that's Katie, me, Kaden, and Neil.
And you guys just rotate?
Yeah, but the actual process is every, hopefully, 6 weeks. And that's, at school meeting, we just reach it, it's another item on the agenda, nominations are open, anyone can nominate either themselves or a team, and then it's voted on.
And whoever's been a JC clerk in the past, describe what the duties and responsibilities are? Specifically for you, Carlos.
We just run the meeting and make sure there's write-up forms in the correct places.
Oftentimes, we need to give permission for things, so like, if there's a mess case, and that stuff left out, needs to be put on the JC evidence shelf, which is in the JC room. But that person is leaving and they need that item for that night, so they have to get JC clerk's permission to take that thing off the evidence shelf. But that case will still be heard tomorrow. We handle a few other things. We run the show. They also get to file paperwork.
Oh, yeah, paperwork.
Oh, and we get to change the wallpaper on the JC computer.
We get to change the background on the bulletin board. Fancy stuff.
So it is written in here as well, in the glossary about what they're responsibilities are, if you're curious. And I believe something like this got posted in a recent blog on our website as well, with an attachment that has a J.C. guide and a trial guide. So if there's ever any questions, or one of your kids is talking about this happened and blah, 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 and you're like, I saw this and it was a couple of years ago, and now I don't remember anymore that is there. There.
I want to be a shill. Can JC ever be fun?
Yeah.
It depends on whether Larry's on or not.
I
He is the fun sucker.
In what way?
The fun sucker. Wow.
He is the fun sucker.
I generally, personally, have fun in JC because I'm a fan of justice.
We can have.
But, generally, Kenzie and other children don't like being pulled away from their activities. And, it's kind of irritating when you're just setting up to play a game with somebody and then you get called into JC.
With that being said, what is the frequency of cases? How often do you meet and how many
It
cases
varies
per day?
wildly.
Really?
JC meets every day. The amount of cases does vary wildly.
Like sometimes there's none, sometimes sometimes there's 15, sometimes there's none at all.
Has anyone tried to track that to the moon cycles?
We get credit for that.
I can't have you get ice cream
No.
when you have cases.
But the goal of the JC must vote to hear every case. And so every case has to be presented to the JC, where they will determine if they want to hear it or not. And I would say 98% of the cases are heard, where they bring in the people who heard it up and whatnot. The 2%, it varies on why they don't hear them, but it's very few and far between. But so even if you have 15 cases in one day, and that might take 3 hours, the JC clerk can say, we're only going to hear up to about 2 hours of JC. We're going to postpone the other ones to tomorrow. Those cases will still get heard. It's just a day postponed.
Yeah. The kind of case that doesn't get heard would be like one where I meant to write the tennis rackets were left down in the theater, and instead I just wrote the tennis rackets in the theater.
I'm not sure what happened. I'm not sure what you're trying to tell me. Or it can be kind of, stupid, if you will, where someone writing up a case where so-and-so pronounced a word wrong, and I see that as harassment. You're just going to look at that and go, no, that's silly.
Grab Nazis.
Yeah, kind of.
I was going to say that I think many times when kids come here and are new to the system, part of getting used to it is writing things up. Oh, can I write that up? Oh, can I write that up? And so I think sometimes they test it out, especially the younger ones. And it sometimes happens, sometimes it doesn't. But that's part of the learning process as well, as long as, and they do get the message from JC. You've written up 3 or 4 of these, so sometimes it's having a talk with the law clerk, sometimes it's just the JC clerks themselves that help them understand that JC is serious.
And to follow up with what Connie was saying about getting used to writing things up, it could be the exact opposite. Like, for me, for instance, I didn't write anything up until I think my 2nd year here. It took me a while to get used to it, but yeah, it's fun now. I enjoy being in JC.
The best thing is when you write up a staff.
Yeah.
Coming from a schooling system where adults are the authority and their word is law, and here it's completely different. And I feel, oh Larry, you left out your coffee mug. Time for some justice.
It's called milking it.
Does Larry have a digital copy company around?
I thought we weren't going to specifics.
In theory.
If something like that ever happened, just
See, you talked a little bit about new kids wanting to exercise the system and write things up. How do they react to being written up the first time?
It depends, you know, on the person. So.
No, I've noticed that. The first time someone gets written up, it's usually the same reaction, to where it's almost like they're being called into the principal's office. They feel like they have to defend themselves. They say, I mean, I suppose I did that. They're a bit nervous. They feel like, oh no, they're gonna call my parents, or no, I'm gonna get a pink slip. But then you get your sentence and you start to understand. That's how I was. I've noticed other kids in the first days here, or the first time being written up. It's generally the same reaction. I never really thought about it. But there is definitely a connection made with J.C. and the authority figures of traditional school, which are generally feared cattle from.
Agreeing with Carlos, it can be taken very personally. That's how it was for me. And a lot of the time, and especially with me, it's hard to take responsibility for it. I can feel Ellie laughing right now about it, but it took me a while to finally take responsibility for the things that I was leaving out or what I did wrong on accident, that I didn't really understand what was going on. But like I said, it works out relatively quickly. You learn to understand it.
And I think sometimes they ask for a staff member or a friend to sit with them. Sometimes that beginning step is just this, okay, if you're here with me, it can't be too bad. And so we do.
If the action is so egregious that by default and for obvious reasons, it would absolutely go right to a school meeting, does it still have to go through J.C. first?
Are you saying the incident happens?
Yeah, it's serious. They did something that was a threat away from calling local law enforcement. So obviously that sort of action is going to end up in school meeting.
Something as ridiculous as a kid going outside decapitating a squirrel, coming inside, beating Larry with that dead squirrel. Even in a situation as ridiculous and serious as that.
No specific cases.
Not that that's ever happened.
It's still going to go through school. It's still going to go through J.C. And sometimes if there's a more sensitive case in J.C., J.C. will close J.C. Well, the Judicial Committee will close J.C. and that will mean, you know, no one just can come. What?
I thought you said the Jewish community.
I thought it did. Throw around some bagels. Around the door.
I want to address Mark's question. There's another question Jeff had earlier, the same question. What happens when something really bad happens? When something really bad happens and somebody needs to be sat on to be controlled, staff's going to deal with it, right? I mean, none of us here remember this person. There was a young kid here who was fine, and he was out of control. I mean, he's not here. He was here. His parents did not understand the model. They were looking for daycare. The kid was way too young, and he was out of control, like hitting, biting, knocking people's glasses off their face. And at one point, staff just had to hold him and call his parents and say, you have to come now. Your kid is out of control. And so at the end of the day, if something's really outrageous, staff step in and deal with it. And if something was really bad and illegal on the outside, we're going to get law enforcement involved. Of course we are. You know, but thankfully those things don't generally happen here.
And I think also though that if it's not something that's so crazy that they're taking away cuffs or something and never seen again or whatnot, but you know, if the 5-year-old having that inability to control himself, it'll still get written up. The parents are going to call, he'll get picked up, but it'll still get written up and then heard when he's able to come back, is my understanding. Because it's still something where he can defend himself. And who knows what was going on that caused him to do that. You know, you can't be here right now, but who knows what happened that caused you. So that you still have your chance to defend yourself. Connie?
I'd also like to point out that the JC chairman can call a special school meeting. We don't have to wait until that next Thursday rolls around. If something happens on a Friday and it feels necessary to hear it sooner than later, the chairman has a procedure in place to call a special school meeting.
Cool.
One thing that I don't mean to correct Larry on, but it's not just staff that will interject and stop something. I think the whole community would. I mean, as long as they were able to, I think that it's not just up to the staff to stop something bad and violent from happening. I absolutely think that quite a few members of the community would step in and say, this is not okay.
Yeah, Mark.
I apologize, my question, this has gone to, you know, a far side of the spectrum, that was not my intent. But to clarify, in case I didn't hear it, through formality, any event would have to go through JC before it gets to school meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Is there any recourse beyond school meeting? So if I take it to trial, I'm found guilty, is there any further recourse beyond that, any appeals procedure?
Like are you suggesting if you're found guilty in a trial?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still possible to go before the school meetings, just there should be a real retrial. So I think that would be your next recourse.
But just to be clear, school meeting is different than a trial. A trial is its own separate thing, and then there's certain sentences that are referred to school meeting. And I believe, can you appeal a school meeting mandated sentence? It hasn't happened since I've been here.
I suppose you could, but I'm not sure.
I don't know where it would go, because it would go right to school meeting.
Yeah. Also, it's never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in the case of a trial, you might say, okay, I was found guilty here, but here's the new case cracking evidence that has come up. I think that this could change the result, and there should be a retrial.
I think there's a specific law in the trial section, I think it's E7, if you want to find it in the law book, that specifically says how a retrial can work. I believe it says that if there's new evidence, then a retrial can be considered. Otherwise, you can't just try again. It's not a do-over.
Yeah, assessing their guilt. Never touch this can.
And in my ages and eons of time being here at this school, 3 years. Yeah, that's never happened. Okay. So I found the actual law here, if anyone would like to hear it.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, okay. Consider whether to hold a new trial under either of the following circumstances. That is, a motion to hold a new trial requires a 2/3 vote to carry. A guilty verdict has been rendered and new evidence or witnesses can be produced. Or B, the prosecution or defense alleges that the actions of the chair or clerk unfairly affected the outcome of the trial.
Now, is that, I'm curious, that verbiage specifically, is that part of the Sudbury model for back east, or was that collectively written up here with the founders?
Give an answer.
You're the only one that might know, maybe Mr. Connie.
Yeah, so it's a funny thing. It's funny because, you know, in retrospect, I don't recommend founding groups do this. But this is what we did. We adopted the Sudbury School law book, bylaws, and assembly policies. We just adopted them. And, you know, so the law, a great deal of that law book is very, very similar to Sudbury Valley's. But we've been changing it over the years. But yeah, that verbiage I'm pretty sure is probably straight from Sudbury Valley. That specific verbiage, because I don't have a remembrance of ever editing that and changing it. So a lot of it did come from Sudbury Valley. But we've been, you know, we modify it over the course of years. And I think a funny story about this is that, of course, we adopted the Sudbury law book and then just did a control find, right? We replaced Sudbury with Alpine Valley, right? And so we ended up with, you know, a law book 3 years running, right, with references to the barn. Right? We don't have a barn, we don't have a barn, so it did take a long time to finally, clear all that stuff out. But a lot of it is from Sudbury Valley.
Is there a rotation through the student members and the staff members for the JC committee members? Does everyone ultimately present themselves in rotation? And who handles that?
Yeah, that would be this person, the school
Okay.
meeting chair. Pretty much every school, well, you serve for a week. And
Okay.
the week that each younger, middle, older staff serve is determined months in advance by the school meeting chair. But the rotation will go through, and pretty much every school meeting member will have time to serve on JC.
Excellent.
And there are some laws in the law book that regulate that and ensure the school meeting chairman can't just, like, I couldn't just make Christy serve every week for the next month
Sure.
if I wanted to.
But Carlos will sometimes be the second, or the chair, and then sometimes serve as a member on the committee, or how does that work?
Also, replacements happen all the time. Like, if my younger member for this week isn't here, he's just absent.
Right.
I'll just call in another younger member to serve for that day. So if it's my week to serve as a middle member, on the days that I'm chair, I just have a replacement middle member.
Okay, but you bounce back and forth different positions depending on what's going on. And the chair serves for 6 weeks at a time, 4 weeks at a time?
Yeah.
And you can bounce back and forth within the same JC. Staff are called in once a week, so we serve 1 day a week. And so if it's my day to serve, and I wrote up a case or got written up, I may be serving one case, then they're hearing my case, and I go to the other side, and now I'm a state alleged violator or a
And
complainant.
a new staff.
And a new staff member comes in. So, and that happens on any member, if there's bias, then you simply state, I'm biased, I was there, or I took part in it, or whatever the reason is, and they find a new person to replace you. So, yeah, it's pretty fluid. It's very rare that you'll have the same members, even for 1 day, serve all cases.
Do you all love this? Do you love this system?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is the best.
It's the best argument ever.
Yeah, I can think of no better alternative. There might be one, but this is the only one that we have.
But, well, yeah.
I was gonna say, can I just say something about that?
Please.
Having been back at, conventional school for, it seems like 40 years now, since the beginning of January. The